Hey friends, welcome back to Art from Chaos. It is July, and that means that we're going to be making some new friends because July is a softie month. And a softie is also called a plushie or a stuffy or many other things. It's essentially a little soft sculpture made out of felt or whatever kind of cloth you want to make this guy out of. And we're going to be making some new friends today. So it can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. I also made this one. He's my Franken friend, and he's just a rectangle with some circles and more rectangles, and how easy is that? You could also make it more complicated. Like my little cat hair is just a tiny bit more difficult, but not really more difficult. And you can also keep it super simple. This one we made back at Camp STEM a couple years ago. We were learning about cyanobacteria, so we made some little plushy cyanobacterias, and how adorable is that? So I'm going to show you all of the supplies that you need, all the steps to take, and of course you don't have to copy exactly what I do. Yours does not have to turn out to be an adorable little black cat head, though it could be. And we can make them however you want to. So join me over at the table and let's start making new friends today. So these are the basic materials that you're going to need to create a stuffy or a soft sculpture or a plushie or whatever you decide to call this thing. You're first going to need some paper and a pencil. You're going to need some kind of material to make the entire thing out of. I like to use sheets of felt because they're very cheap. These sheets of felt that I'm getting are about 25 cents from Hobby Lobby or Michael's or wherever you decide to get your art supplies. You'll need something to stuff in the stuffy. So I've got a basic pillow filling. It's just a bunch of fluffy fiber. You can really use anything. You can use cotton balls. You can use leftover scraps. Anything that's soft you can put into this thing. You're going to need thread, or I like to use embroidery floss, which comes in little bundles like this. And you're also going to need some kind of needle. They do make big plastic needles if you're a bit younger and maybe you don't have the motor skills we need to do this yet, or if it's kind of hard for you to see those tiny little eyes of the needle, you can get a really big one like this. So your first step is going to be to actually brainstorm and figure out what kind of thing you want to make. For me today, I'm going to be making a little black cat head, so I'm just going to make the head, not the entire body. And so what I've taken is my felt, and I went ahead and folded it in half. And the reason that I folded my felt in half is because I'm going to need a front side and a back side, and I want those to be symmetrical. So the easiest way to do that is just to fold it in half, and when I'm ready to cut out the shape, it'll be the exact same thing front and back. I also cut out the shapes from other colors of felt. I'm going to have green eyes with little black pupils, and I'm also going to have a little gray nose. So my guy's going to be really simple. I'm just putting on 2 eyes and a nose on my black cat face. So the reason you have their paper, pencil, and scissors is because you don't want to just go right into cutting your felt, because sometimes that's the only felt or the only fabric that you have and you get kind of one shot at it. So I always have my students draw it on paper first. When you draw it on your paper, you really want your paper to be the same size as the felt that you're going to be going onto. So I've already cut down my paper to the size, and I'm going to draw my cat head. And again, I'm keeping it super simple. I'm working all the way to the edges because I don't want a teeny tiny little cat head. Okay, so I went ahead and finished drawing out my cat head, and I tried to take up all the space on my paper, and I cut him out. So my video did cut out, but the only thing that you've missed is that I've cut out my paper, and then I laid it down on that square of fabric that I had, and I cut around it with my scissors. If you were using a lighter color fabric, and this is recommended, you could actually take a marker and trace around it. That way you don't have to worry about holding down the paper and risking it slipping around. Then I cut out around it to get the shape, and I ended up with 2 pieces because it was overlapped. So then I had 2 pieces of my cat head, a front side and a back side. Next we need to thread our needle. It doesn't matter what kind of needle that you use, and I like to use needles with really big eyes, and the eye is the part of the needle that's the hole at the top. Is called the eye of the needle. You could use regular thread, or you could use embroidery floss or yarn or string or whatever you happen to have, as long as it's going to fit through the eye of the needle. So I'm taking my embroidery floss and I'm going to thread it through the eye of the needle. It comes right out. And then I'm just going to do a very simple little knot here. It doesn't have to be super tight. So I'm going to take it and make a U shape I'm going to cross that over, and then I'm going to take my little tail I have and I'm going to push it through and pull it down. So now I've got a very simple little knot in my thread. Next up is actually sewing our two pieces together. It doesn't matter where you start on this thing. It can be absolutely anywhere. When I did something square like the Franken friend, he kind of goes from corner all the way around back to the other corner. But on something round like this, it really doesn't matter where you start. So what I'm doing is something called a wraparound stitch, and I already started on it a little bit. I've gone underneath and pushed my needle through both pieces of the fabric, and then I pulled it all the way through. This is a part where a lot of people might mess up because they'll think, oh, I've got enough, I'm going to keep going and going. Then they've got all this stuff back here that they're going to let dangle. You got to make sure that it goes all the way through. Now my thread is on the top, and I'm going to go back to the bottom. So for me, I'm going to keep this easy rule of I always go through the bottom piece or the back piece. I'm never going to go into the top. I'm always wrapping around and going into the back. So I'm actually going to stop the video for a second and finish this part up and speed it up so you don't have to be bored watching me do all of this stuff. So I'm going to keep on going all the way around, except when I get back to where I started, I'm going to leave a little bit of a pocket so I can put in the stuff that we're going to stuff in this guy. Okay, catch back up in a second. So now I've gone mostly all the way around my cat head, and I love that my embroidery floss kind of changes color because it's a little hard to see the stitch over here, but you can really see that stitch, that wraparound stitch very well over on these parts where I started to turn white. Also, it can show you how far apart you need to get your stitches. You don't want them to be super far apart from each other because then all your stuff is going to come out of it. So it needs to be about the width of your pinky nail apart from each other. That's a good rule to keep those things nice and tight. So now I'm almost back. This is where I started. This is where I've ended so far. And I've got this little pocket where I can start to stuff my filling. So I'm going to take my fluffy stuff and I'm going to rip it into little pieces that are easier to work with. And I'm just going to start stuffing them into my little cat head. It's completely up to you how much you want to use. It depends on how fat and fluffy you want your stuffy to be, or your softie to be, or plushy, or whatever you guys call these things. And I'm going to go, oh, I think he leads a little bit more on his chin. And I think that's about all that I want because it's starting to kind of poof out the sides there. So that's going to be all the filling that I want to put in. So I'm going to keep on going. And I need just a few more little stitches to fill this guy. He looks ready to get finished up now. So I'm just sewing up the rest of my little kitty cat head. And I think about 3 more stitches will do it. 1, 2, and then 3 little stitches. Now my video did cut out at the beginning of this, so you guys didn't get to see that I left a little tail of thread. It's about the length of my pinky, so we're doing a lot of pinky measurements in this one, and I've come back and met that. So now to finish this thing up and make sure that he's going to stay together, I'm actually going to tie those 2 pieces of string together, the one that's attached to my needle and the one that was dangling that I left there in the beginning. So I'm cutting off my needle. You really want to make sure that you leave some thread at the end. You don't want to go right up to the teeniest tiniest bit because then it's going to be very hard for you to tie this off. So rule of pinky, again, it's about the size of my pinky. It's about the length of my pinky, and I don't want to go any shorter than that when I'm sewing. So I'm going to crisscross these and tie them off together. Just 1 little knot and 2 little knots. I can cut off the extra little bits here that I don't want to have. And now I've got my basic little cat head shape. Next, I'm going to be rethreading my needle, and I'm going to start to add on the eyes and the nose to finish this friend off. So my needle is rethreaded, and I'm going to start adding on my 2 eyes and my little triangle nose for my cat face. So the way that I'm going to show you, I'm not exactly sure how the professionals would do this, but this is how I always put on the things that go on top if I'm layering pieces of felt. Like when we did this one back at Camp STEM a couple summers ago, we made some plush cyanobacteria, and we needed the little cells to go inside of this guy. So this is how I attached the blue and the 2 dots here. And on my Franken friend, this is how I attached his eyes, his nostrils, his stitched mouth, and even the bolts on the side and his hair. And I think he looks pretty cool. Some people want to really hide the thread, but I like the thread showing. It's totally up to you if you want to try to hide it, but I'm going to show you how to do it with the thread showing because I think it's kind of cute and it gives it more of a stitchy look. So I'm first putting on my eyes, and I know I want them to go right here where eyes should go. So I'm going to start up here at the top, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to let my needle poke out where I want my eye to be. So I've just kind of brought it in through the top of the head, and I'm going to pull through, and I want to leave a little bit of a tail hanging out here at the end because I'm going to tie that off in a little bit. So again, about the length of your pinky, I'm leaving a little tail here. So my thread's coming out where I want the eye to go. I put my pupil, I just sat it right on top of the actual eye, and I'm going to run a thread through both of those together, and then just let this guy run down my string to where the eye is going to go. So this stuff isn't really difficult to hold together. I'm only going to do one little stitch. So I'm going in the bottom. So I went in the top there. I'm going in the bottom, and that's going to hold that together. Now the thing I want to show you before I actually finish that up, I know that my other eye is going to go right next to this. So I'm actually pushing over, and I'm going to have my needle come out where I want my other eye to start. And I think this is just a little bit of a time saver, and it gets it all done in a really efficient way. So now my eye, this eye is sewn on. Bam, that's done. This is already coming out where I want my other eye to go. So I'm going to string on the pupil and the iris at the same time. And if I decide, oh, that's a bit too close, I don't like it, I'll just shift that right over, and it's not a problem. So now I'm going to go in the bottom, and I've got to think a little bit ahead, like what am I going to add next? I know I'm putting on my nose next, and my nose is going to go right there. So I'm going to put on my little nose, and I'm going to run my needle out where the nose goes. That way it's all together. I'm going to do a little crossover, and I know I want to have something at the bottom of the nose, so I'm putting it back through the bottom. And that way I never lose track of my actual needle, and all my little pieces are coming on. So one thing that can happen if you're doing things like that is it can kind of get stuck in there a little bit. And if it gets stuck, you can back it out, or actually I'm going to show you what happens. You could back it out, or you could even just cut your thread. Like let's say that it got stuck. I'm just going to cut it, and I'm going to pull it out and just leave that, and I can start all over because sometimes things can get tangled up in there. So if yours gets stuck like that, you can always back it out or even cut it up. So I'm going to keep on going and freeze this a little bit, fast forward a little bit so you can see the end product. So now I'm done adding the things onto my face, my 2 eyes and my nose. So when I finished my nose here, I put my needle into the little kitty's face, and I ran it through the inside up to the top where we left that little tail when we first came in through the top of the head. And then I'm going to cut off my needle, and I've made sure that I have enough thread so I'm not trying to tie the tiniest piece of thread. I'm going to cross those over and give them a good tie, double knot that, and I can nip off these little edges here. And I even left some little edges over here because I wanted them to look like whiskers, and in a moment I'll go back and add some more of those over there. So that is it. My little kitty plush head is done, and I think he's adorable. And apparently I must be really wanting Halloween soon because I'm making little black cats and Frankensteins. So that's it. That's how you sew your softie, and I hope to see you guys bring a lot of these in. If you're my students, come and show me what you made over the summer, and that is all I'm going to show you for today. So have a fantastic summer, guys. Thanks. See ya.